For nearly 2,000 miles, from the Atlantic seaboard of Morocco to the eastern end of the greatest desert in the world, the bare ground and shifting sands of the Sahara offer no foothold for any way of life but the hard road of the nomad. Yet it was on the edge of this desert, in the green fields and gardens along the valley of the Nile, that the written history of the human race began. This great river, draining the mountains and lakes of Africa, has watered a fertile strip between the deserts of Libya and Arabia, and along its course, an ancient civilization prospered and flourished. The antiquity of Egypt clings to these pyramids, standing within sight of the capital city. But modern Cairo comes as a surprise. This is not just an ancient city being modernized. This is a city that is being transformed, with every month some new building redrawing the skyline, and hotels and office buildings springing up along the river. Here, the slender minaret of the Cairo Tower sets the pace for a city vibrant with the sounds of the 20th century. Probably most visitors get their first sight of Egypt at Cairo International Airport, where they are welcomed by a strikingly modern building that symbolizes the country's commitment to tomorrow. The journey into the city from the airport transforms the bus ride into a trip through time, along the wide, sunny streets of Heliopolis and its sister suburbs. Finally, we turn into Opera Square, dominated by the unequivocally Victorian facade of the Opera House. The view from the Cairo Tower provides the best panorama of the Nile Hilton Hotel across the river, itself one of the new landmarks of Cairo. Setting the pace for the growth of modern Egypt is Cairo University, which first opened its doors to students in 1925 with only 4 faculties. Today, 40,000 students study under 13 separate faculties, and throughout the country, the university administers intensive research programs in various scientific establishments. The Nile Delta, on which Cairo stands, has for long been a high road for the peoples of the Middle East. The Coptic Christian Church of El Malak is one of the ancient religious foundations which mark this crossroads. It dates from the year 420, and among the screens of ivory and cedar, the mosaics and the icons, the earliest Christian liturgy can still be heard. Only a few hundred yards of twisting alleyways away from El Malak is the possibly even older synagogue of Ben Ezra, where those of the Jewish faith still worship today. Among the manuscripts which are preserved here is a Torah, or Book of Laws, written on deerskin 400 years before Christ. But the Alabaster Mosque in this Muslim city of many mosques provides with its minarets and cool courtyards and fine Arab use of light and shade, a symbol of modern Cairo. Traditional Islamic piety side by side with the worldly activity of the city streets outside. In Egypt, the very modern and the very old recur together constantly. Thus, the ancient imperious head of Ramses II looks across the traffic to the Cairo Museum and the treasure of the pharaoh Tutankhamun. Here, in gold and glittering enamel, is the pharaoh seated with his wife before him. A touching scene from a short life of long ago. For before he was 19 years old, the golden throne of the pharaoh was empty, and the solemn procession to the tomb began. One of the golden cases that held the young king's body. Anubis, the jackal god of the graveyards. At the doorway to the sepulchre, the king himself stands guard in effigy and watches as the long procession of priests and treasures, slaves and chariots passes into the inner tomb and to the doors of the golden sarcophagus. The ceremonies are over, and the young pharaoh is alone with his servants, his beasts, his chariots, his gold, and the darkness. 3,000 years later, the last resting place of Tutankhamun was discovered in the Valley of the Kings near Luxor, the only intact tomb of a pharaoh ever to be found in the parched and honey-colored canyon where the rulers of 3 royal families are buried. A mile or two beyond the Valley of the Kings, the morning light moves down from the red cliffs onto the neat arcades of the temple of Queen Hatshepsut in the city of the dead. The temple was built by a woman of strong character and great political influence in the 18th dynasty for the worship of her soul after her death. Few surviving paintings above ground can compare in quality and freshness with those in the temple, especially the marvelously accurate and finished pictures of the Queen's ships, so little different from the graceful vessels that still sail the Nile below the cataracts. On the bank of the river opposite Luxor stand the colossi of Memnon, now eroded and faceless in the setting sun. They mark the frontier between the tomb cities to the west of the Nile in the Valley of the Dead and the great temples on the east side at Luxor and at Karnak in the Valley of the Living. Only a little distance from the waters of the Nile, the sacred lake of Karnak reflects the last of the setting sun. And soon, down the alabaster corridor to the temple, the lotus columns of the great hall cast the first shadow of the moon. Karnak was built by so many kings, has seen so many centuries come and go, that to us it is Egypt, silent, patient, and very old. The panorama of history unfolds a few more millennia, and the sun rises behind a temple of today as the Muezzin calls the faithful to prayer. Much of this land of Egypt is still dependent upon the river to make a little green, and the patient farmer has learned to use every precious drop. For never far away is the desert, ancient, hostile, and apparently useless. What gold or diamonds or even oil may be to another land, water is to Egypt. And in many areas, something is being done about the desert. In 7 years in the province of Al-Tahrir, 25,000 acres have been reclaimed from the drifting sand, and work is going on to bring another 50,000 under useful cultivation. The reclamation programs depend upon the volume of water which can be made available. Water and powerful machinery are at the very roots of any attempt to increase the fertility of Egypt. And always, water has meant the Nile. About 600 miles south of Cairo, the smooth flow of the Nile is broken by the first cataract at Aswan. Here, over 50 years ago, the biggest dam in the world was built to control and make use of the floods that come roaring down each year from the mountains of Abyssinia. But only 4 miles to the south, the road over the bare, stony hills by the river turns suddenly to the very edge of the titanic excavation for a dam that will dwarf all others. The technical statistics of the high dam at Aswan are complex and impressive. But even more impressive is the far-reaching effect that this work will have on the Egyptian economy. It will increase the cultivated area of the country by 1/4. It will kill forever the ancient menace of uncontrollable floods. It will produce 5 times as much electricity as the old Aswan hydroelectric station. But above all, to Egyptians, it is a symbol of Egypt's coming of age, a self-imposed task whose success will be taken as proof that Egypt has joined the nations of the technological age. As the waters of the Nile begin to pile up behind the high dam, the whole valley up to the Sudanese frontier will feel the influence of the rising water, not least Ramses II's great temple at Abu Simbel. The 4 62-foot statues of Ramses II sit in pairs on either side of the entrance to the interior of the temple. Each bears the striped linen headdress worn only by kings and the double diadem of Egypt. Below the great statues, small figures, but still greater than life size, represent the king's wives and children. And here is the hawk, symbol of the sun god Horus. To save this tremendous monument from the rising waters of the Nile, UNESCO experts carried out a survey based on a bold plan submitted by Swedish engineers to cut the monument out of the solid rock and lift it up to a place of safety above the water. The weight of the water from the high dam racing through the turbines will help to power the brand new industrial complex of Kema, which is already turning out fertilizers on a substantial scale. Modern plants are helping to set the pace for new industries all over Egypt, like this steelworks not far from Cairo. The automobile is as much a factor in modern Egyptian life as it is elsewhere. But the importation of vehicles was a problem until the foundations of a domestic industry were laid with the opening of the Nasra factory at Helwan. An automobile industry calls for fuel supplies for its products. And here again, the rapidly rising requirements for vehicles of all kinds, coupled with a care for the balance of payments, encouraged a thorough search for domestic supplies of oil. At the head of the Red Sea, the Sinai Peninsula conforms to the Egyptian rule of contrast by dotting the waters with the rigs of the first substantial oil field to be found on Egyptian territory. This offshore drilling 30 miles out to sea is the first of several successes in the search for local oil supplies. A silver gleam from the tank farms along the shore marks for the northbound tankers the last miles of ocean before they heave to and wait for the pilot to come aboard for the passage of the Suez Canal. The canal, a little over 100 miles long, is one of the world's busiest waterways. In a recent year, nearly 20,000 vessels were guided through the canal by highly skilled pilots. Ships such as these, flying the flags of many nations, carried well over 200 million tons of cargo, much of it crude oil and petroleum products. Communication systems are kept busy, marshalling the north and southbound convoys through the cuts and dredged channels that will take them across the desert landscape. Efficient as it already is, the Canal Authority must prepare for the future. A 5-year plan calls for further deepening to accommodate even larger vessels, and as part of its service to world shipping, it offers a floating dry dock of 25,000 tons lifting capacity. The unobtrusive management of the communication and engineering problems involved in operating the canal gives little opportunity for the thousands of tourists who pass through each year to realize that the Suez Canal was, and still is, a work of the hands of devoted men. At Port Said, the passengers on the north and southbound shipping have their first view of the traditional tourist gateway to Egypt. But only a few miles to the west, a tourist center of the most modern kind is growing up. Of all the cities of the Mediterranean, nowhere is a long history so intriguingly presented as in Alexandria. Founded by Alexander the Great, capital under the Ptolemies, scene of Cleopatra's coronation, with such a background, it is not surprising that Alexandria is cosmopolitan still. But in modern Alexandria, the ghosts of Cleopatra, Diocletian, and Pompey walk no more, and the avenues, the promenades, the palaces and the beaches belong to the tourists and the vacationers. Racing at Alexandria Sporting Club is as highly organized and enthusiastically followed as anywhere in the world. And the beaches on the Mediterranean are near at hand. Sun, sea, and sand. They're all there in modern Egypt, as well as more colorful entertainment once the sun sets. In Cairo, the neon signs have started signaling their worldly message that this is the second half of the 20th century. In the cafes, the men can talk over a thick coffee, secure in the certainty that not even the most emancipated of women will invade this last stronghold of the exclusive male. But further south, stretching back to the heartland of Africa, the River Nile flows quietly, unchanged as it has been for centuries. The Nile, a silent witness to the lives and monuments of uncounted generations, reflecting the contrast of today and 1,000 yesterdays.
Here on the plateau of Gizeh stands forever the mightiest of human achievements. Civilizations are like islands on the ocean of barbarism. Over this one, the Sphinx has gazed and watched for 5,000 years.
With each new dawn, I see the sun god rise on the far bank of the Nile. His first ray is for my face, which is turned towards him. And for 5,000 years, I have seen all the suns men can remember come up in the sky. I saw the history of Egypt in its first glow, as tomorrow I shall see the east burning with a new flame.